But let's continue the conversation from here, even as we anticipate the State of the Nation address to be delivered by His Excellency the President. We're joined now by Edem Senanu, who is an anti-graft campaigner, and we're going to be talking about corruption, the fight against it, and how much has been achieved, within the last year or over the cycle of the presidency of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Mr. Senanu, thank you very much for joining us, staying with us on JoyNews.
And thank you for having me.
Great. So I'd want you to give us an assessment of, before we delve into the nitty-gritty, I want you to give us an assessment of the state of the nation when it comes to corruption-related matters. Where do we find ourselves currently as a country?
Well, the Nana Akufo-Addo government, His Excellency's government, came in riding on the back of a strong campaign of anti-corruption and also highlighting the so-called incompetencies at the time of the previous government. I think that over the last 4 years, this government has not done enough to show that it is much more competent nor adept at dealing with issues of corruption, which is sad. I think that the people of this country expect that with every change of government, we ought to do significantly and considerably better than the past government so that we can talk about progress in specific areas. So with regard to corruption, we don't seem to have made the substantive inroads we anticipated. And I would say that we probably are just about the same level when we made a transition. Things like the Office of the Special Prosecutor was supposed to get us far ahead in terms of dealing with major issues of graft. We didn't see the traction, we didn't get the mileage. And then there were all the other instances of issues that came up. Initially, I think our concern was just simply when we would have a situation of the president saying that he has received a report that said that nothing untoward had happened. That didn't help because ideally, the presidency ought not to have been a place where these announcements are made. The various investigative bodies ought to be the ones that, you do the report, engage the media, and tell us what you found. We ask you the questions, then you demonstrate that this was a thorough investigation and therefore your conclusions are valid. So by and large, we haven't made significant strides, and I think that the corruption perception index of Transparency International shows us that we haven't really made much progress over the last 4 years.
You talk about the lack of progress. It would also be insightful to look at, the perception indexes and all of that. In fact, in 2020, US News ranked Ghana as one of the 10 most corrupt countries in the world on a top 10 list, placing us third. Now, we were rubbing shoulders with Colombia and, other such countries. How much of a worry is it that we're finding ourselves consistently in this web of corruption? And apart from all that you've mentioned, what do we really do to ensure that leadership can take us to the next level where corruption indeed becomes something very unattractive?
Well, first of all, I'm not one of those who likes it when the international media kinds of takes us to the cleanest, ranking us the third or so. I would say that that's probably an extreme position. I don't know what data they use to put us there. But more substantively, what should we be doing? I think that anything that is worth doing must be done well. And when our president says that he's serious about fighting corruption, we need that posture to translate into tangible actions when issues come up. For example, I mean, one of my personal concerns is that perhaps the value of loyalty that the president holds may be obfuscating the understanding that when people have breached laws, when members of his government have done something wrong, he should leave them to face the music and he should distance himself from it. So I'd like the president in the next 4 years, when he has less of, a responsibility to allow the influences of probably political party and other, groupings to influence him, to take a very firm stance against his own people where issues have come up and not seem to be explaining of things that have happened. So the president's posture is very important. This is somebody I've known since my student days. And I remember when a number of them came in, when we had to do Kumi Preku. We mobilized the students and went through the bushes, And so you seem to think you have a certain understanding of the man there. And our expectations of him is much bigger, greater than what we have seen so far. I'm hoping that in the next 4 years, we will see those substantive decisions that cut across and don't seem to be more or less suggesting that, look, there are some people who I need to protect because we all need this country to move forward. So starting with the president. And then I worry about our governance architecture. How does the president monitor the ministers? Because we had such a large number of ministries. How are we fixing targets for each portfolio and monitoring them real time, such that when these ministers are going off, when they are not achieving what is expected, when they engage in actions that might, as it were, impugn the integrity of the government, how do we keep track of that? And I think we need to think a lot more carefully through that. I know in East Africa, they have a dashboard where each sector has a target broken down into subsectors. So you are clear if it's housing, what the targets are, if it's agri, and the whole public is monitoring. We can see on a month-by-month basis what they are doing. We have a good understanding of the contracts they've engaged in, and they are compelled to make sure that they are engaging with the stakeholders in that space, such that, as we know from good governance, the more the stakeholders are being engaged and participatorily involved in decision-making, the less likely we are going to have issues of graft. So our thinking around how we organize execution of contracts, how our ministers work, and who at the presidency is keeping an eye on these targets and these ministers. It's not just that they have a portfolio and we wait and then they splash the media with, we've executed this, we are doing that number of roads or houses. No. We need to be a little more clinical in doing that and then ensuring that all the stakeholders to that sector are on board so that issues of grafts are minimized. So that's also a substantive area we can look at. We also clearly need to look at some of the laws. I mean, the assets declaration regime we have is not fit for purpose. That law needs to be reworked. The witness protection law has not protected witnesses. We had cases where persons who've been fingered then called the person who reported them, and they were not supposed to have that information. So how are those leakages happening? We need to tighten that up. We need a political party financing bill, one that defines the electoral period, because as it is, it's almost as if in election years, you can start at the beginning of the year, right to the end of the year, canvassing, campaigning. What that means is that the bill on elections for any party goes extremely high, and subsequently, if they get into government, they have to fill that hole. Let's cut that down. For example, say 4 months of the year. So it's August to November, I don't know. We need a bill, a law that clearly defines the electoral season, a law that defines how parties are financed. Because if you have any individuals or corporate entities giving huge sums to parties, they are obviously, after the election, and when a government is placed, they're going to make demands. And those demands may actually be of positions which they don't have the competences for, or for contracts that they don't deserve. And then the cycle continues. So a political party financing law that, as it were, compels political parties to canvass for people, and then you probably set a ceiling. The maximum any individual can give is, let's say, 1,000 cedis. And we know that, I mean, nobody is going to feel influenced when you can't demand 1,000 cedis. So that's another area, a political party financing bill. We also need to look at the educational system. I think that what we see at the national level is most likely a reflection of the core values we are, as it were, nurturing our young people with. Do we have any core values? I do training for young Africans across Africa. Often we cover about 15 countries or so. When I ask them, how many of them have a set of core values by which they are living their lives? 80% have their hands down. Just about 20%, including the Ghanaians. So you have a generation of people who are growing up who don't have integrity, honesty, hard work as values that they are looking to promoting, they are pursuing, that govern their lives. So if such people get into public space, the likelihood is that the shortcuts to enriching themselves is what they'll be doing. So how much more effort? Today I was just looking at the revision of the RME curriculum as I was waiting for this program and trying to figure out what are the core values they put in there, even from the ethical part. And I didn't see anything on honesty, integrity, and hard work. How are we grooming the next generation to lead this country and lead it in a way that we get the results we want to see? So there are several issues we should be looking at. The number of ministries are too many. I'm hoping I've started hearing something that some of the ministries are going to be cut down. We really need to cut down that level of money that we are spending on public sector and cut it down to the barest minimum. We probably need a law that sets a ceiling on the number of ministries, departments, and agencies so that the monies that we have, the funding is well used. And then we need some constitutional reforms. There are clearly gaps we can see. A presidency, an executive presidency that appoints everything from A to Z and boards, and sometimes it takes a whole year for all of that to be done. And then there are all these positions where it is as if one party, as we say, winner takes it all. That begins to increase the tensions we see in the country. That is why when one government gets in, they seem to want to grab much more because you're not quite sure what will happen next. So these are all issues that substantively, as citizens, we need to occupy the space. We need to make sure that the next 4 years, even as we pray for our president and all the people who will be appointed, that we are speaking up and ensuring that we begin to see some substantive actions being taken in these spaces.
Well, Edem, very interesting. And one of the things I was going to discuss with you, you touched on, hammered on, I should say, political party funding, because I feel a lot of the corruption we see in the system actually starts from right there. Because once you influence them, they get into power. It's about give and take, and it starts from there. So very interesting one. But we have to move on now. I want you to just give us a snippet on this one and summarize your final thoughts, because we'll actually be crossing over to Parliament. Edem, you spoke initially about some demonstrations in which you had embarked on together with other people from way back, and with even the likes of Nana Addo Akufo-Addo, who currently is our president. I see you smiling. Are you disappointed when it comes to the fight against corruption, for example, and what you've seen so far? You've given, your thoughts on that, but are you disappointed in Nana Addo Akufo-Addo?
I certainly have been disappointed in the rollout of activities relating to good governance and anti-corruption under His Excellency Nana Addo Akufo-Addo because of my past experiences working with people like that and the kind of issues we've taken up, the change. I tell people that, look, protests and marches, in my experience growing up as a student leader, we brought a lot of change to Ghana. There's no protests we're involved in that didn't move forward the frontiers of development or of democracy in this country. And when I look back and I think of all the things, the water under the bridge, and I think of this president, there's so much more I was expecting. Right. And I'm hoping that in the next 4 years, we're going to see that change. We're going to see the Nana Addo, Akufo-Addo of times old that we were expecting so much from. And that's not to say that there are not other people. I think that every president elected for this country has something to offer this country. Once they are elected, all of us must galvanize ourselves and support them to bring the changes we want to see. I feel sad when I travel to other countries and I'm like, I rub shoulders with them. They are not more intelligent than us. I don't understand why my country should be shining much more, And so the next government has a lot to offer us if they're going to do the right take the right kind of actions. And if they will listen, let the stakeholders, let the citizens speak and listen to them. Let's not have a situation where a few people seem to be speaking louder and their interests may not align with the interests of the greater majority of Ghanaians. Let's make sure that at the end of the next 4 years, this presidency actually delivers on the expectations of Ghanaians at large. That would be my take.
Edem, thank you very much for engaging us. Always refreshing hearing from you, and wish you the very best.
Thank you for having you.
The day. We did promise that we'd bring you extensive coverage of what exactly is going down in Parliament today, and it has to do with the State of the Nation address. Let's cross over now to Parliament, where my co-host, my colleague Mama V, is standing by with Alhaj Muhammad Mubarak Muntaka. He is the Member of Parliament for Asawase, and she's going to be having an interaction with him from Parliament House. All right, so we'll cross over shortly to Parliament, where indeed we're going to be having those interactions. Very important day, constitutional requirement that His Excellency the President is fulfilling. It has to do with the State of the Nation address. You know that come tomorrow midnight, Parliament is going to be dissolved. A minute after that, there's going to be that meeting where indeed the swearing in of the members of Parliament is actually going to take place, following which they are going to elect a speaker and the respective deputies. There's a bit of an interesting picture there because there's been a lot of talk about who the speaker is going to be. Now the NPP, putting forward the current speaker, Professor Aaron Mike Okwe. John Bwedu, General Secretary of the NPP, has also been speaking in recent times, talking about the fact that if the NDC doesn't behave, so to speak, they might not even have the opportunity of having one of the deputy speakers of Parliament. And in 2004, we had some such situation with, Freddie Wasimu Blay at the time with the CPP. So quite some interesting developments there. But as it stands now, 137, seats apiece, with that outstanding, seat going to the Fomena MP who went independent. In the coming days, we shall see. In fact, right after tomorrow, we shall see how exactly that is going to pan out. Following which, on the 7th, as we've been indicating with all the security preparation and all of that, we're going to have the swearing in of the president-elect, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, in Parliament. Now, this is a novelty because in times past, we've had it at the Independence Square, the Black Star Square. This time, it's going to take place in the August House of Parliament. So it is on the back of all of these that we're bringing you today's reportage, live from Parliament, as we await from around 10 o'clock, in about some 30 plus minutes, His Excellency the President's delivery of the State of the Nation address. Don't you forget, January the 7th, the day for the swearing in is actually a holiday. It is Constitution Day, and especially if you don't have any business in that part of town, stay put. Don't go out there because there's going to be a massive security presence, like we heard from the Ministry of Information presser, and you don't want to put yourself at risk. You don't want to, do anything that ought not to be done. So we'll be crossing over to Parliament shortly, but we take a bit of a breather from here. When we return, we connect with Mama V in Parliament.